A lot of people have been asking me recently about how to choose a 35mm camera, film camera. So if you buy one second hand, there's one or two things that you can check to make sure that you're getting a good one. Now, the acid test for any camera is actually to put a roll of film through it, which you can't do if you're just looking at one in a shop. So these things that I'm about to show you will help you hopefully choose a good one. So the first thing we're going to do is open the back of the camera. And what I'm looking for here is the shutters, the shutter blades. In this camera, you can see these very fine overlapping metal blades here. Now, they've got a fingerprint on them. That's normally not a very good thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's any problem with the shutter. So what I'm actually checking for is to make sure there's no bulges or bends in those shutter blades. Make sure they're all overlapping and they're touching each other, and that there's no scratch marks on them. So there's none of that, so we're looking good. The other thing I'm checking for, especially around the edges of the door, is rust or any kind of bubbling, which usually indicates that the camera's been kept somewhere damp, and that might mean there's something wrong on the inside of the camera. So it sounds a bit funny, but one quite good thing you can do is smell the camera. If it smells of damp, it's probably been in someone's attic or somewhere a little bit damp for a long time, and you know, might be best not to go for that one. When we're inside the camera, we also want to check the light traps, which are usually made out of felt, like a material that helps prevent any light leaking inside the camera when it's closed. So they're in different places depending on which camera you've got. But for example, that sponge there's also a little bit down this side. I'm making sure that all that stuff is still in place. Sometimes when cameras get very old, that material can break down. So if you open the back of the camera and you see what look like little black crumbs inside it, that might indicate that that light proofing material is disintegrating. You can replace it. You can buy kits to replace it if you feel brave enough to do that, but probably best avoid a camera that's got a bad light seal on it. Next thing I'm going to do is just fire the shutter a few times. And I'm looking to make sure that there's nothing catching inside that everything's moving nice and smoothly. When I wind the camera on, it's not sticking or jamming in any way, and that the shutter blades are completely uncovering the picture area. That all seems to be fine on here. The next thing I'm going to do is just visually inspect the camera quickly. One thing in particular that I'm looking for are any bad dents that indicate the camera might have been dropped. You tend to find them if they're there on the pentaprism, this pyramid shaped thing on the top. And again, this one looks absolutely fine from that point of view. Now, you can't tell exactly what the shutter speeds are, but you can listen and you can hear to make sure that everything sounds about right. So for example, if I set the camera to 1 second shutter here, fire the shutter, you can hear that's about 1 second. If you listen very carefully, you can also hear the clockwork. If it's a camera that's got a mechanical shutter, you'll hear that sort of zzz noise. That needs to be nice and even. You don't want it to sort of speed up or slow down or sound like it might jam. I'm now going to set the camera to B. This is the setting that you can have for doing very long exposures, and basically when you press the button, the shutter will remain open for as long as you keep your finger on the button. What I'm checking for is to make sure that the shutter releases cleanly. So if I press the button now, I'm going to release it. What should happen is what just happened there. There's no delay. As soon as I release that button, it went click. That's the shutter closing. If there's any delay with that, it might indicate that the mechanism's a bit worn or there's some problem with the timings of the camera. Next, I'm going to have a look at the lens as well. Most cameras have got a little lever on the back which will enable you to open and close the aperture, and you can actually see the blades sliding over each other. What I'm looking for are any marks on those blades, particularly what might look like oil or grease. Some cameras, as they get older, the lubricant sort of leaks into the aperture blades. If they've got oil on, they're unlikely to be open and close quickly. Again, this one looks fine. Little tiny bits of dust probably don't matter very much, but obviously you don't want a lens with any chips or serious scratches on the outside. The other thing I'm looking for is you sometimes get mildew. This is usually with cameras that have been kept somewhere damp. It almost looks like little kind of spider's webs coming in from the edge of the lens. Again, it's possible to clean this professionally. It's usually not cheap, so I would tend to avoid lenses that have got any signs of mildew in them. I'm now going to have a look through the viewfinder, and I'm looking for any signs of marks, scratches, stuff like that. You might notice the odd fleck of dust. That usually isn't a problem. It won't show up on your photographs, but it's going to be a bit annoying if you've got sort of scratches on the focusing screen. I'm going to check the light meter next. So I'll switch it on, and we're going to check to see if the light meter is changing depending on if we point the camera somewhere dark or light. Now, it's difficult to check the accuracy of the light meter unless you happen to have another handheld light meter with you. But one thing you can do is, if you're indoors in an artificially lit room or a room with light coming through a window, the exposure is usually about 400 ISO, 60th of a second at f2.8. And that's about what this one is. Some 35mm cameras have got batteries in them. They've got a battery compartment at the bottom. I take that battery compartment off. You just need a penny or a 2p coin to unscrew that. And what I'm looking for is any signs of furriness, like corrosion, which might be caused by a leaky battery. Usually looks like sort of blue fur or something like that. It's fairly clean, this one, so I've nothing to worry about on that score. Another check you can do with the lens is to try the focus and the zoom, if it is a zoom lens, and just make sure that that's smooth, that it doesn't get tighter as you turn it one way or the other, and that there's no sort of squeaks or crunching kind of sounds, which might indicate that you've got sort of grit or dust or something like that. So if you can do this quick MOT check on a camera before you buy it, you're reasonably confident that you've got a good camera that's working. If you buy from a camera shop, you usually get a warranty with used equipment, about 3 months it normally is. Obviously you haven't got that if you buy the cameras privately, so all the more reason to just check it out beforehand. There's a huge range of second-hand 35mm cameras to choose from. I'm going to put on the list now a selection of 35mm cameras I regard as having a reputation for reliability, good quality cameras, and not too expensive. So it really helps to shop around a little bit, and hopefully you'll grab yourself a bargain.